Good evening. Welcome back to our Tutti Tavola cooking classes. I hope you had a good month of August. The fall season is fast approaching, and with that, our chef has many more suggestions for great recipes and tips to create the best dishes ever. A special thank you goes to the Loft at Longo's, back with us seasonal ingredients and fresh products at the Longo's store near you, and as suggestions on wine pairing to make any culinary experience unique. Today, Roberto will show us how to prepare braised chicken with artichokes and olives. In this recipe, a must of the Italian traditional cuisine, the delicate taste of chicken is combined with the sweetness of the artichokes and the unique flavors of the olives. I'm sure you will enjoy this dish and you will prepare it for all your family and friends to surprise them. The month of September at the ICCO Canada is rich in events and initiatives. We're going full speed ahead to provide business assistance to companies and to offer our members occasions for networking and new business opportunities. Chef Roberto will be back on Tuesday, September 15th with a fall dessert presented by Longo's, hazelnut brown butter cake with pears and apples. On Thursday, September 17th, we will feature a special class, Great Italian Wines, with a sommelier, along with pairing suggestions, always at 6 p.m. On Tuesday, September 22nd, we will virtually bring to Toronto Michelin star chef Claudio Stadler from Milan, and on Tuesday, September 29th, we will host Chef Rob Gentile of Buca Ristorante in Toronto to present the Panino Gourmet, when they will show us more gourmet options for a fast meal on the go. You can't miss these special classes. Look for your online invitations coming soon. Also, September 24th will be the day of our annual Business Excellence Award evening, when we will recognize the achievements and successes of many Italian and Canadian entrepreneurs. This year's recipients will be all women who stood out for their great vision and business acumen. Follow our social media and visit our website to find out about these and other events and to get details on how to become a member of the ICCO Canada. But now, let's go back to our program for tonight. Hi, Roberto, are you there? I saw you dancing.
I'm here. Oh, did you see me dancing? I'm so excited to be back. I just can't control myself.
That's great. So I guess you're ready to present your recipe.
I am. This is a great one.
So tell us what is it that you like particularly about this dish?
Oh, I mean, this is kind of one of my go-to dishes when I don't have a lot of time. When I'm entertaining, I have some people coming over, and then I realize, oh man, I haven't vacuumed in a couple days or something, and I need to spend some time doing other things, and I need to throw dinner together quick. So this is a super easy recipe that seems like you spend a lot more time on it than you actually do.
Well, that's great. Yeah, it looks very articulate, but this is great. And tell me something. Are artichokes and olive a popular combination?
Oh yeah, I mean that's half of my pizza toppings when I order pizza. Olives and artichokes, they're just a beautiful combination because they really complement each other. We're going to talk a little bit about that during the class, about the difference between the different types of olives and why artichokes work so well with them. But yeah, they're classic. There's thousands of recipes that showcase these two ingredients.
That's great. So, well, thank you very much. I guess we should get started. I will be back with you during the Q&A sessions. Thank you very much, and we look forward to hear all about the braised chicken. So let's start. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm glad to be back. I hope you guys are too. Thanks for tuning in. We are going to do a braised chicken dish, and this is, like I said earlier with Tiziana, it's almost too easy, this dish. There is nothing technically difficult. Ingredients wise, there's nothing crazy in this. It's super easy. It's all about the combination of the flavors, the way that they work together. So we start off with some chicken. Now, chicken's chicken. right? There's good chicken, there's great chicken. What you want to do is look for some chicken thighs that are skin on, bone in. Now, I always use skin on, bone in chicken when I do braised chicken recipes. You can use boneless if you want. It just doesn't have as much flavor. Whenever you cook meat on the bone, there is always more flavor inherently in the meat. So leave the bones on. When you're done, it falls right off the bone. It's super easy to eat, or you can pick it up and eat it like a giant chicken wing, whatever you want. But you really get a lot more flavor with the bone on. The skin, we always want to keep the skin on. And I'm going to show you why. We're going to head over to the stove. The fat, the flavor is in the skin. So what we want to do is utilize that flavor, utilize that fat. If you do skin off chicken, you don't get that natural fat from the chicken in the pan. So if you were to do this dish without any skin on the meat, first thing you would do is put oil into the pan anyway. So if it's a health thing, you don't want to eat chicken skin because, oh, it's fat, it's this, it's that. It doesn't matter. You need fat in the pan anyway. You might as well use the fat that is in the chicken itself. Now, what we want to do is we want to add just a little drop of oil. And the drop of oil is just to give it flavor, more nice, fairly warm pan. It's not smoking hot, but it's warm enough that when the chicken goes in, you can hear that sizzling. You want to make sure it's warm enough to start the searing process right away. If your pan isn't hot, as soon as your chicken goes in, the temperature of the pan will drop too much, and then you won't get a nice brown sear. So we're doing this so that we crisp up our chicken skin and we really start building flavors in the dish. So we put it in, a little salt and pepper on the chicken. That's all we're doing, a little salt and pepper. And then we put it with the skin side down. Once it's in the pan, we're just gonna add a little bit more salt and pepper. We're seasoning both sides of the chicken. We're seasoning the skin side so that our skin is super tasty. And we're seasoning the meat side because this is the seasoning that will actually penetrate down into the meat and flavor the meat. Now, there is one problem with this recipe, and that is searing chicken on your stove makes a mess. It makes a huge mess. You'll get fat splattered all over everywhere. So what we want to do is just cover this while we're searing it. So if you have a giant lid, you can put a giant lid on there. If not, I just have a big aluminum pie plate. We're going to put that on top. That step has nothing to do, excuse me, has nothing to do with the actual cooking. All that's there for is to prevent the fat from splattering all over your stove. Like I said, it's the only difficult part of this recipe is the cleanup afterwards, especially if you don't do that, if you don't cover your chicken. While that's searing, we're just going to get the other ingredients together. And like I said, it is silly easy how little there is to this recipe. So a little bit of olives. So we have two kinds of olives. We're using green olives and black olives. So I like using a mix of both because they each bring something different to the dish. The black olives will give you a nice sweetness. They'll give you a rich sort of olive flavor, whereas the green ones, they're a little bit more tart. They're a little bit more tannic, so they bring a bit of brightness to the dish. So all we're going to do with our olives is cut them in half. This is a very rustic, very, like I said, super easy recipe. So we just cut them in half. If they're pitted, that's all you have to do. If they're not, these ones have the black olives have the pits in them. You can either squish it with your knife and then pick out the seed, or you can just do it with your fingers. Just go in there. It's one of the joys of being a cook is we get to dirty our hands all the time. And that's it. We have our olives ready. The ratio of olives is I do about 4 of each kind of olives per chicken thigh. Then our next ingredient is just a little bit of tomatoes. So a nice mix of different colored tomatoes. And again, we're just going to cut this into small pieces. So the little grape tomato, we just cut it in half. Doesn't have to be in one direction. You can cut some of them long, some of them short. Doesn't really matter. By the time this dish is done, these break down, they cook down. So you won't really see the size, the shape of the tomatoes. You just want to break them down into nice small little pieces. So our tomatoes, our olives, and then the last thing we have are our artichokes. Now, you can do whole fresh artichokes. The recipe works well with fresh artichokes, but honestly, if you use fresh artichokes, you have to commit a couple hours to cleaning and cooking your artichokes. So a little bit of, Longo's brand pre-cooked artichokes, just cut into quarters. That's all you need. Again, this recipe is about simplicity. Knock yourself out and use fresh artichokes, but you don't have to. So we're going to start taking a look to see if we have some color. Just starting to get a little bit of color. We're going to let that go a little longer. Cover that up right away so I don't have to spend all night cleaning. And our other ingredients, very simple, a little bit of garlic and some fresh herbs. There's really not a ton of stuff to this recipe. So once our chicken is seared, we're going to start making it all in the pan. Now, I'm using a cast iron pan. You don't have to use cast iron. The one that I'm going to show you at the end is actually made in a stainless steel pan. It doesn't really matter. As long as your pan has a really nice heavy bottom and you can get a nice hard sear on the chicken. Whenever you're searing a piece of meat, you need a heavy pan. You can't use those super thin little aluminum pans that, your grandmother handed down to you. They don't work for searing. Even when the pan's hot, as soon as your meat goes into it, the temperature drops too low and you don't get a nice brown sear. If you don't get a nice brown sear on your chicken skin right now, then that chicken skin will always be like chewy and soggy and I don't know, not very appetizing. So nice heavy bottom pan, doesn't matter whether it's cast iron or stainless steel, or if you have, the line of Crusade or Staub or any of those pans, you can use anything as long as it's a nice heavy pan. So any questions before we move on to the next step?
Actually, yes. First of all, I'd like to ask you, if we don't want to use chicken, does the recipe work with any other types of meat?
Yeah, so this recipe, I've also done a very similar recipe with pork before, so where I'll just take like a pork strip loin or a pork tenderloin, exact same process. Sear it, remove it, get all your ingredients into it, and then braise it off in the oven. It works well with pork, not as well with beef or venison or any game meats because the meat is too strong and too heavy. When you get into red meat, you want to change your braising and do heavier, richer sort of braising methods. So red wine, heavier herbs, bigger, more flavorful ingredients. This is sort of a transition dish. It's kind of between summer and fall because it's braising, which is generally associated with winter dishes, but it's still very light. Like there's white wine, the artichokes, the olives, there's nothing too heavy and dense in it. So yes, you can use other meat, keep the ingredients the same, use pork. If you want to use beef, then add some heavier stuff into the pan.
Another question is, are the pre-cooked artichokes frozen ones?
No, these were the ones out of the can. I should have kept the can. It's just the can Longo's brand artichokes. You open them up, pour out the water, and then just cut them in quarters.
And another question about the chicken. What about boneless and skinless chicken breasts? Still browned?
Like I said, if you use boneless, skinless chicken, especially the breast, your cooking time will be cut down a lot. Like they'll cook, by the time you're done searing them, you'll put them in the oven. So 15 minutes, they'll be done. And if you're going to do that, you still want to brown your meat. If it doesn't have skin on it, you still want to brown it. So what you have to do is put a little bit of butter and olive oil in the pan and then sear your skinless piece of meat in the pan with butter and olive oil. The butter will go brown and it'll give it that nice brown color that we're looking for. Going to head back over to the stove.
Okay, what's the quickest way to prepare fresh artichokes? Maybe you want to I don't know if you can explain it in the
Absolutely,
time that we have.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
You can, like I said, it's using the word quick and artichokes doesn't really work. If you're using fresh artichokes, you have to take some time to do it. It really does take a bit of time. So what we do is you take your artichokes. I should have brought one with me so I could show you all. But if you take a full bulb of an artichoke, you want to cut the top off. And once you cut the top of it off, you'll see the choke, the actual purple flowers on the inside. What we generally do is we'll just take like a melon baller and just go in and scoop out the inside of the thistle. It's very pointy, it's very papery, it's very tough. So we'll just scoop out the inside with a melon ball and then peel off the outside leaves. So the outside leaves are very green. And you peel them off until you get to the nice yellow leaves. Those are the soft ones that are actually edible. Whenever you disrupt the artichoke, so when you cut off the top, you rub it with a lemon, like a cut piece of lemon, to get the acid from the lemon on top of it. It prevents it from going brown. When you scoop it out, you drizzle a little bit of lemon juice on the inside. When you peel off the outside leaves, you rub it with a half of a lemon. So if you have any open cuts on your hands, you're going to hate doing artichokes because you get lemon juice all over your hands. And then you can trim off the stem. You trim it off with a small knife until you get to the nice yellowy white inside core of the stem. From there, you just poach it. So you just put it into some water, flavor it however you want. Usually I'll use a bunch of fresh herbs, peppercorns, bay leaves, and a little bit of acid. Usually I'll just cut a few, like for every 5 artichokes, I'll cut 1 lemon in half and throw that into the water. And you start it off in cold water. You bring it up to a boil. Let them simmer, light simmer. You don't want a big heavy boil. A nice light simmer until they're nice and soft. Then you pull them out and your artichokes are done.
Perfect. And the ones that
sounds simple, but it takes a long time.
The ones that you're using tonight, are they hearts or bottoms?
They are, well, so this is the way that you normally get the artichokes in the cans. They don't have the stem on them. Generally, when they're processed, they don't have any stem. Okay. So that's sort of the bulb. The stem would be down here somewhere. So these are just the flowers, just the main part of the artichoke. And yeah, it works really well. These are always, the nice thing about the processed artichokes is that they're very consistent. You don't get the green leaves that are too tough to eat on the outside. Whereas when you're cleaning them yourselves, you'll get to a point where you're tired of cleaning artichokes and you kind of miss a couple leaves. It happens. And yeah, it happens. You'll get some tough leaves. All right, so now we're going to move back over to the stove, and our chicken should be fairly ready. Nice brown skin. So I just flipped them over to sear the other side. You want to get a little bit of color on the bottom side, on the meat side as well. So once we have a nice bit of color, we just gently remove them from the pan. Now, be careful if you're using, where are they? Tongs, like, I don't even have them here. These kind of tongs. These ones are plastic, so they're not too bad. But if you use the metal tongs that are shaped like this, when you go in, quite often the edges are kind of sharp. So you'll actually tear the skin of the chicken. You don't want to do that. You want to try and keep the chicken skin nice and whole so that it stays nice and whole, and when you're done, it looks just very natural. So be very delicate when we're fishing these out. And they're not sticking because we were patient, we took our time, we let the chicken do what it was supposed to do. So these guys, see, that's a little bit under-seared, so I'm going to leave that in for a minute just to get a touch more color. So once we remove all the chicken, we start adding our flavoring. This is where we start building the rest of the dish. So we have a little bit of garlic that's just been chopped into big pieces, basically cut in half. We throw that into our pan. We take a little bit of herbs. So we have a sprig of rosemary. No need to pick it and chop it. Throw it in. We have a big gangly handful of thyme, again, throw it in. When we throw it in, it usually makes a lot of noise because what we're doing is we're deep frying the herbs now because they're in the fat from the chicken. So stand back and make some little splatters. But, oh, it's starting to smell good already. We just throw this in, let it cook for a minute. We want to let the garlic get a little bit of color. There we go. So now our chicken is nice, has a nice little bit of brown on it. And then this guy's okay. All right. So now I haven't lowered the heat. It's still on medium. We're just going to let our garlic get a bit of color. You can see it's starting to get a little bit of brown. We'll let our herbs go in. And now we start adding all of our other ingredients. So we're going to throw our olives in. And again, it makes a lot of noise. It splatters fat all over your stove. Just stand back. Be prepared for it. And we give it a shake. Now, it really doesn't matter which order you throw these in. I like to put the artichokes and the olives in first. That way we get a little bit of searing on them as well. So it just increases the sweetness of the dish. And then we give that a minute or two, not too much time. Oh yeah, can you guys see the fat all over here? That's awesome. Just give it a minute or two, and then we add our tomatoes. Just dump them all in. And a little bit of chili flakes, not too much. I mean, if you like spicy, go crazy. Just a little bit of chili flakes. And because, like I said, this is sort of a transition dish. It's not quite like, it's not the heavy braised dishes that you're used to in winter. We're going to keep it even a little bit lighter by adding a bit of lemon. So I'm just going to zest a lemon into the pan, right in, and I'm just letting it cook right now. Like I haven't touched the temperature at all. Just letting it do its thing. There's enough fat in the pan that you don't have to worry about anything burning. You can pre-zest your lemon if you really want to, but I never see the need to. I just zest right away right into the pan. And then we're just going to squeeze a little bit of the lemon juice into the pan. So we cut our lemon in half and just squeeze it right into the pan. And again, when you do this, it'll make a lot of splattering. It'll make a lot of noise. Don't be scared. Right in. And generally, I would season a little bit of salt and pepper right now, but you have to be fairly careful with that. Olives and artichokes tend to be quite salty to begin with, so go easy with your salt and pepper. You can always adjust it a little bit later, but we just want to put a little bit in. But again, be gentle. Once our sauce is in and everything is happening, we have one last ingredient, which is the wine. So this is kind of what makes it that, like I said, that shoulder braise, like between the seasons, because in the winter time when we're braising, we usually use red wine. We usually get very thick, rich braises, whereas this with the white wine, it's a lot lighter, and that's what works with the chicken. If you do this, or pork, like I said, if you do this same braise with a piece of meat, it's just not the same. You don't get the same flavor profile. So we put our chicken back in, and I'm just sort of resting it on top, putting it into the pan just a little bit. You don't have to bury the chicken into the actual ingredients that are there. In fact, you don't want to do that. You want to leave the chicken sort of out of all the liquid so that when we put it in the oven and we cook it, the skin will stay dry and it'll stay nice and crispy. So we have our pan ready here. Everything's good to go. I think I put everything in there. And we just take the lid that we used before and cover it up and fire it back in the oven. So our oven is preheated to 350 degrees, and in it goes. And that's pretty much it. Like that's where we are. That's how simple it is. It's something that can be done without too much thought, without too much prep. So, any questions before we move on?
Yes, we have some more questions for you. I guess you partially answered this one, but The question is, what is the secret so the skinned chicken doesn't stick to the pan? I guess you.
It's not. It's partially about the fact that there's skin there and the fat is coming out of the chicken, but more importantly, it's the temperature. It's the fact that the pan is hot and the chicken is cold. So I had the chicken in the fridge right until I was ready to sear. So leave your chicken or whatever you're searing in a pan, leave it in the fridge, let it get as cold as it can, and then let your pan get hot. And that is one of the biggest differences between professional cooks and home cooks, is that in professional kitchens, we have, you know, big open space and giant exhaust hoods with suppression systems, and we're used to cooking over much hotter heat. And if your pan isn't hot, then not only will you not get a brown color, but chances are it'll stick like crazy. So whenever you're cooking something, you want to have the difference in temperature as big as you can. That means you want your cooking surface to be as hot as it can be, and your cooking product to be as cold as it can be.
Perfect. That's a great suggestion. Thank you. And can one use chopped garlic instead of chopped garlic in the jar instead of the fresh ones?
Yeah, you absolutely can. Chopped garlic. I mean, right now it's kind of crazy what's happening. It's hard to find garlic in Ontario. You guys know that? It's like it's very hit and miss. So yes, you can use chopped garlic, but you have to modify the way you cook. If you use chopped garlic, it cooks like that. If I were to use chopped garlic in this recipe, when I put it in the frying pan, you have about 10 seconds before it's burnt. Maybe 15 seconds before it's burnt. So if you're going to use chopped garlic, yes, put it in your pan, but get ready with everything else to throw in there right away. Because by the time you turn around and you grab your recipe and you say, what do I put in next? I don't know. Oh yeah, the tomatoes. And you walk back to your pan, your garlic will be burnt. So yes, absolutely do it, but be ready to cook much quicker.
Okay, great. And can you double the recipe for a crowd?
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is one of those recipes that you can cook the day before. It's all you do, you take it to the level where it comes out of the oven, which is going to be very soon. And then you just let it cool down and you pack it up. And then the next day, you just put the chicken back into the liquid, back into a pan, back into the oven, or quite often I'll just put it into like a nice pretty porcelain serving tray kind of thing, oven tray. And then you just warm it all back up in the oven and then finish your sauce right at the end. So yes, you can do, I've done this recipe. I mean, I've done 50 pieces of chicken in giant pans before. So yes, absolutely. Great dish for crowds.
Perfect. And could you use a crozet pot instead of the heavy pan? And also, what would you do if you don't have cast iron? How do you put it in the oven? What will you use?
So like any pan, like I said, any pan with a heavy bottom. I'm going to show you in a few minutes the stainless steel pan that I used for the one I did before. But any pan will work as long as it has a heavy bottom. A Creuset or Staub pan will work. Like they're talking more about the trays, right? Like these things, like oven pan. Ugh. Like something like this. What I'll do is I'll sear the chicken, and then once the chicken is seared, I'll put all the ingredients into the pan like I just did, so that I can scrape the bottom of the pan and get all the little pieces of meat and skin that are stuck to the bottom of the pan. Then you can put it all into here and cover this and fire it in the oven. Absolutely, 100%. And this way it just looks a little prettier than just dropping a frying pan on the table.
That's great.
But you can't sear in this. That's the only problem. You can't sear meat in this.
That's right. What would be a good side dish to this chicken?
Ooh, so like you'll see when it's done. I'm going to pull it out now. We're going to go back over to the stove because this is a very good question. Generally, I like to do something sort of in the realm of mashed potatoes with this, or even mashed sweet potatoes, because it's very there's a lot of sauce to it. There's a lot of liquid. So I mean, you can do roasted potatoes. So this is what it looks like. Sorry, I'll get back to that. This one I just did a little bit earlier, just in case the one I just started didn't have time to finish. But it's the exact same procedure as I did with the cast iron pan, but I'm just using a stainless steel pan here. So it's the exact same. Everything's the same. All we do here is once it comes out of the oven, we want to fish out, some of the herbs. You don't have to take them all out because it's a very rustic dish. But all the thyme is all here, but you'll see all the leaves are gone. All the leaves have fallen off into the pan, so that's where they should be. Take this and we throw that out. We look for the big rosemary stalk. You can take it out if you want, or you can leave it in and it's a nice surprise for someone. So for starch, like I said, you can see here in the bottom, there's a good amount of sauce here. So if you put it on mashed potatoes, it gives you like a nice way to use the liquid in the dish, soak it up with the mashed potatoes, kind of like gravy. Or what else I like to do, which is something I'm going to do today, is just do a little bit of really rustic, thick cut toast. So this is a little bit of baguette cut very thick. And all we're going to do is drizzle this with a little bit of olive oil and be generous. Throw that on. You really want more olive oil than you think you need because you're going to penetrate. You want that olive oil to get right down into the bread and give it a ton of flavor. We're going to add a little bit of salt and pepper right on top. You can go crazy and you can add herbs to this. You can do all kinds of different things, but I'm just going to go with salt and pepper because we have a ton of flavor already happening in this dish. So I'm going to just, put my oven on broil. Yeah, this will be fine. Sorry, just got to move some trays around. Making a whole lot of noise here. And yes, the cast iron pan is heavy, but it works really well. So I'll get back to questions in a second, but we're at a point here where we bring our chicken up to a boil and we just want to reduce the liquid till it gets sort of thick. So you can see here, if I take a spoon and I just drizzle a spoon through here, you can see it's sort of sticking to the bottom of the spoon. It's not running off. If it runs off, it means it's a little bit too thin. This is where we also check our seasoning. So, yeah, that's all right. I'm gonna add a touch of pepper and just a touch of salt. And once our liquid is boiling here, we are good to go with our final step of the sauce. So the final step of the sauce is just something that we call, in restaurant lingo, we call it mounting. We're going to mount the sauce. The real term, it's a French term called monter au beurre, and it just means to add some butter into the sauce to make it nice and rich. Now, it's a very simple step, but it's also a little bit difficult in the sense that you have to remember a couple of things. One, you want to remove your pan from the heat. So I'm just going to take it off the burner, slide it over here. Even though my burner's off, it stays hot for a while. So we just slide it right off to the burner. And then we add our butter. So the butter's already cut into little cubes so that you can control how much butter you put in. Now, if you don't want a lot of butter, because you don't want it to be heavy, then use very cold butter. This butter was in the fridge, so it's very, very cold, so that a few little cubes of the butter will thicken the sauce quickly. If you're like, oh man, that's not enough sauce, I need to stretch it, I need to make more sauce, use butter that's at room temperature. That way your sauce won't thicken as quickly. So once it's off the heat, we take a few cubes of butter and we just throw it in and let it melt. You want to agitate your pan You can take the chicken out if you really want to, but you don't have to. It'll melt right in and it'll be okay. And we just slowly start melting our butter into the pan. Again, off the heat. There's enough residual heat in the sauce in the pan to get it to melt the butter. And you just add the butter until you think, you know, yeah, that's enough. I'm going to feel guilty if I add any more butter in there. So give it a little stir. Once you don't see those little blobs of butter anymore, we're ready for our final step, which is just getting a little bit of cheese on here. So a little bit of Parmigiano Reggiano, just a little piece, and we just grate it right on top. And try not to get too much on the pan, because whatever hits the pan is going to stick to the pan, and then you don't get to eat it. Or people will fight for it, try and get those crispy little bits off the side of the pan. It's never fun to have fights at the dinner table. So a little bit of cheese. And by a little, I mean, you know, a bit. And this gives it some nice richness. Again, not too rich, but enough to just, you know, make it feel like a real braise. And we're going to we're going to broil this. So our bread is going to go in to get a little bit of color. And our chicken is going to go in to get a little bit of color, if they both fit. Yeah, they both fit, more or less. Now, when I broil, I never close the oven. I just leave it open so that I can watch, because it's going to go from being almost there to being burnt in, you know, 15, 20 seconds. So just take a second, take a break, just let everything melt, let everything come together. It's pretty cool. And this is the step that you can do with one of the roasting pans too, one of the Staubach Crusade roasting pans. So any questions while we're
Yes.
broiling stuff?
Yeah, so can you recommend alternatives to olives for people who need to reduce their salt intake?
That's a tough one. I mean, the olives are a very prominent flavor in this dish. So if you want to, you can still keep the artichokes, and you can use things like fennel, and you can use vegetables like parsnips, loaded up with other vegetables, and you'll get a really nice braised dish. It won't be the same, obviously, because like I said, the olives are pretty much the main flavoring. But yeah, any sort of good fresh vegetables, especially root vegetables, some celery root as well, will work really well with this.
Okay, great. And what can be used instead of butter to be dairy free?
You don't have to use the butter. Right at the end, the throwing the butter on and making the sauce a little bit richer, that's not necessary. You can get away with not using the butter at all and reducing your sauce a little bit more, so it's a little bit richer, and it'll be completely fine.
Okay, great. And also, I might have missed it, but did you use parsley? And if so, was it flat leaf or curly?
Yeah, so we are using parsley right at the end, which is going to be in about a minute and a half.
Okay.
And yes, it's flat leaf. I almost always use flat leaf parsley. I'm going to bring this over. I almost always use flat leaf parsley just because I like the flavor of flat leaf parsley much more than curly parsley. So our toast is ready.
Flavors?
What's that? Sorry?
What's the difference in flavor from the flat leaf to curly?
Italian parsley or flat leaf parsley, I just find is a much richer, much deeper, much more intense parsley flavor. Whereas curly parsley is kind of pretty, but it's just a little bit wimpy in the world of parsley, I guess. In the world of herbs, it's just sort of a wimpy parsley flavor, okay. If that makes any sense. Okay, so our chicken is done. I'm going to show you guys this. Oh, it's going to be hot. So that's how it looks when it's done. All we want to do is add a little bit of flavor and a little bit of color. So this is where the parsley goes on. Just a little bit of very rough chopped parsley. This is intended to be a very rustic dish. It's intended to be, you know, look like something that our nonas would make when they didn't have time to do anything else, or ingredients. So don't spend too much time messing around with garnish and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, you can obviously, but it doesn't need it. So when I'm cooking for my family, I do this. I'll usually do this. I'll drop this on the table and let everybody go crazy. You can also plate it if you want. So that's it. Like, you can see the sauce is running around in the bottom. It's an awesome dish. You can hardly wait. Or we can plate it. So we take a nice big bowl and we just gently scoop out a couple pieces of the chicken. Again, hey, there's a rosemary. So when you scoop it out, you find a nice little secret rosemary stash. And we just put a couple pieces, or 5 pieces, however hungry your family is. And we take some of the sauce. And again, the sauce is very chunky. Like, there's a lot of big pieces in this sauce. You can see that you have the olives, you have the artichokes, that's a big giant piece of garlic in there. So you want to show that off. You want to make sure that that's not covered up by the chicken. So we put all our sauce around. We take a couple pieces of our bread, jam it in there, make a couple little rabbit ears, and that's about it. This is one dish. If you guys have watched these classes before, there's some dishes that I spend a lot of time doing garnish on. I really, you know, kind of go a little bit crazy. This is one dish that doesn't need it because the recipe is so simple. The plating should reflect the way in which the recipe is created, the dish is created. So if you do super crazy fancy things to a dish that's so simple, it's just not harmonious. It doesn't really work. It doesn't make sense. I don't know, that hurts me a little bit on the inside. So I like to do simple plating with simple dishes. This is exactly what this is. Doesn't need too much tarting up. That's it. That's all. That's it. So any other questions?
Yeah, it looks fantastic, actually. Really tasty.
And put another one on top.
Can mushrooms be added, Roberto?
Absolutely. So if you're going to use mushrooms, then you want to stay with very lightly flavored mushrooms. You don't want to use shiitakes. They just have too much flavor. You want to go with like even portobellos, way too much mushroom flavor. I love mushrooms, but those two are different. I would use like oyster mushrooms. I would use like a couple cremini mushrooms, little baby ones, and make sure that you peel them. If you use cremini mushrooms, peel off the skin, the head of the mushroom, because that's where a lot of the earthy sort of dirty flavor that comes out of mushrooms is stored in that little bit of skin. So if you peel those and cut them in half, you can throw it into this dish. I've also done it with little tiny potatoes, where if you get the really tiny little potatoes, you can put them into the pan and cook them off at the same time. So this is sort of a jumping off point for a braise. It's sort of a starting point. And you can add so many different flavors to this. You can make it crazy spicy. You can add all kinds of different herbs and make it richer, brighter with different herbs depending on what you put in. You can add different vegetables. You can add anything to it. But you just have to think about what the final flavor profile is going to be. Same with the olives. That's why I use black and green olives, because together they bring to the dish a nice balance of flavor. And there's a million different kinds of olives out there. If you go to the Longo's olive bar, it's sometimes dizzying to see the selection of olives. So you want to pick olives that work with the final flavor profile of the dish. Okay.
How about the white wine that you use? What kind of wine was it exactly?
Oh, I just used a Pinot Grigio. It's just a nice sort of light, a big aspect of the wine. A big reason why we use wine in this dish is for the acid content. We want it to be kind of acidic. So the Pinot Grigio has enough acidity, but it also has a nice sort of a nice flavor to it. It's not too rich. It's not like a, you know, super oaky Chardonnay. It's not like a super sweet, you know, Riesling. So you want to use something that has some real great flavor, but also has a good level of acidity.
Great. And if you were to use pork, like you were suggesting or earlier, what wine would you use in that case?
If I was going to use pork, same thing.
Okay.
A nice, yeah. I would, like I said, this recipe, you could put pork into this recipe and not change a thing. It would be absolutely the same. It's when you start moving into red meats that you have to start adjusting your flavor and building more flavor into the sauce.
And how about if you use different parts of the chicken? Is that going to be the same or same way of
Yeah, no, you can, I mean, whether it's a breast, whether it's a thigh, I mean, you can do it with a drumstick. That doesn't really affect it. Chicken tastes like chicken from different parts of the meat, different parts of from the same bird. Like I said, the white meat cooks a lot quicker. It doesn't have as much flavor as the thighs. That's why we usually stick with the thighs. And the thighs have a way of holding on to the flavor. The flavor from the braise penetrates down into the meat and it stays there. Whereas with white meat, I find it's not as prone to holding on to the flavor. So it's more like you're eating a piece of chicken on top of a sauce, as opposed to this way where the flavors all kind of come together.
Okay, great. And were the olives from the olive bar at Longo's or were they canned?
Yes. Yeah. I just went down and I just, you know, picked them. With olives, like I said earlier, it's really hard. There's so many different kinds, and sometimes it's really hard to pick the right kind of olive. I know a lot of people ask me a lot of questions about olives. And what it comes down to is olives, especially in a dish like this, are a major part of the flavoring. So you have to know the flavor of the olives. You have to know what they're going to taste like. So the best thing to do is just get a whole bunch of olives, you know, and eat some olives and cheese and meat and eat it with crackers, eat it with bread, eat it however you want, so that you familiarize yourself with the flavor of the olives, because it's just like using a herb. There's times where you'll use rosemary in a dish and it'll be wonderful. There's times where you use rosemary in a dish and it overpowers the dish. Olives are exactly the same way. So if you use all black olives in this dish, which I've done, it becomes much sweeter. Whereas if you use all green olives in the dish, it becomes much more, it's more tannic, it's more acidic. So when you eat it, it's just a little too astringent. So a nice mix does a wonderful job with this. So yeah, unfortunately with olives, actually it's not that unfortunate. You have to eat a lot of olives and then you'll understand which ones to select when you're creating dishes.
Okay. I think, well, there are some other questions. Can we use turkey or fish to do this dish, to prepare this?
Yeah, turkey would work. I mean, a turkey thigh is this giant, so you might want to use a little piece of turkey thigh, or do one whole giant turkey thigh. That would actually be kind of awesome. That's a good idea. There's a Thanksgiving dinner idea. Yes, turkey would work very well. Fish is tough because when you braise fish, you have to do more work to the sauce before you start braising the fish. The fish in this instance, by the time it's seared, it would be 3/4 of the way cooked. Then you put it into the sauce, you put it in the oven, you have about 5 minutes before it's cooked, 5-10 minutes, depending on how thick it is and what kind of fish it is. So you don't have time for all the flavors to coalesce, all the flavors to come together, for the juice in the fish to get into the sauce and the sauce itself to penetrate into the fish. So usually when you braise fish, you do a little bit more work to your sauce, cooking it ahead of time, as opposed to what we did here where we just threw everything in a pan. So yes, you could use it with fish if you want to do like a piece of branzino or something like that. This could work. I mean, I would get rid of the rosemary, but you could do the same thing, but I would cook the sauce together first and then sear my fish, drop it in, and just put it in the oven for 5 minutes.
Okay, great. And I think one last question is, can you freeze the dish?
I've never tried it. I would be a little bit hesitant to freeze it because, especially with the butter and the sauce, if you look at the sauce, you can see that it's all nice and together. So if you take this and you freeze it, then suddenly all the butter that we put into the sauce would separate, and it wouldn't be as, it just wouldn't be the same. But the nice thing is, once it's cooked and it's like this, if you cool it down, pack it into an airtight container, a Ziploc, a Rubbermaid, whatever it is, fire it in your fridge. It's good for 4 or 5 days. So you don't have to rush to eat it. You can do it and enjoy it for 4 or 5 days.
Okay,
and like I
great.
said, it's actually better if you do it the day before and then reheat it.
Okay, perfect. Well, somebody already made this recipe this past week, they said, and said it was delicious. So I believe that because it looks really incredible.
Hey, did we get a picture of it?
We haven't, but maybe we will receive it soon. Let's see.
Yeah, I want to see that. And like I said, this is just an idea of doing a lighter sort of braised dish, and you can play with this. You can experiment. This is the joy of cooking, is that we can play. We don't have to follow recipes like it's, I don't know, like it's some witch's brew cauldron bubbling kind of thing that's not going to work if we miss one little ingredient. So play with it, add different ingredients, add different flavors, see how it turns to become one of your staple dishes.
Great. So thank you so much. So what's give us a little preview of next cooking class, the dessert that you will be preparing.
Next cooking class is you guys know that I've been blessed by having wonderful pastry chefs in my restaurants over the years. I am not an incredible baker. I can hold my own. So the recipes that I choose for desserts are, again, usually very easy, very approachable, because I don't want to look like a jerk here in the classes. So it's a brown butter and hazelnut torta, which is my kind of cake because it's not super sweet. Hazelnuts to me are one of my favorite dessert flavors. So it's just it's, again, not too difficult, not too sweet, but super, super delicious.
That's great. So we'll see you again on September 15th at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, September 15th. Next week is a long weekend, so I'm going to wish everybody a long weekend. Labor
I hope
Day
everybody
weekend.
gets a chance to braise some chicken over the long weekend.
There you go. I'll try it too. So thank you so much, Chef Roberto. It was great.
Thank you.
And we'll see you again on September 15th. Thank you everybody for attending the class and following us. Once again, thank you to the Loft at Longos for sponsoring, and on behalf of the ICCO Canada and myself, Astrid and Isabella, and everybody at the chamber, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to a new class on September 15th. Enjoy Labor Day weekend, and grazie a tutti. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.